Okay. Well,
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, we also live downtown.
Okay. Okay.
And you know what, truth be told, my weekly commute times are probably shorter than people who live in Santa Monica. If you aggregate.
well, tell me a little bit about that first, about your commute from Solana Beach and to USC, and how long have you been making this commute for?
So we moved to USC 3 years ago now. So we have been up here for 3 years in our temporary bungalows. And of course, one challenge with LA is always traffic. So one consideration when you move to LA is how do I deal with traffic? And because we're coming out of a world in the biotech space, we talk a lot about the fabric
Yeah.
of how we work and operate. So if you think about it the exact same way, then you say, okay, how can I optimize that? So in fact, we live about 5 minutes from here, but we also live 99 miles from here. And so as a family, we just commute up and down with Amtrak, or I commute up and down with Amtrak. Take Uber, take a scooter, take our USC shuttle buses. And in fact, you use all of that just as part of your fabric. It's 2 hours actually, that's quiet time on the train. And then I just sleep up here 1 or 2 nights and then commute
Okay.
back and forth. And but in fact, as opposed to car commute, which is oftentimes lost time, train commute is gained time.
Yeah, and you can do some work while on the train.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me about what your role will be here. How it will be different than in your previous location, now that you're moving in.
Right. So our motivation actually behind what we are doing here at USC is let me talk about this generically
Oh,
first,
okay.
and then I'll drill down very quickly. USC has set out to solve wicked problems. Okay? What's a wicked problem? A wicked problem is where suboptimal solutions currently exist, such as in cancer. Pretty clear that we only have suboptimal solutions. And where neither the problem space nor the solution space is owned by a particular discipline. True in cancer as well. And if solved, we can have a global impact on society. Again, cancer qualifies. And then leverage USC's unique place in the world. And that is then where this becomes very interesting. This is what became attractive, because as a very large university in the middle of a very large city, you have different schools that you can actually start leveraging into this problem setting. So I'm coming at this I started off in structural genomics, structure-based drug design. That is what brought me from the Bay Area down to San Diego. In San Diego, then we started building the framework around how can we characterize cancer at a particular time point with the liquid biopsy. We then realized, however, that the patient plays as much of a role as the disease does. So how do we bring that to bear? And for that, we need more engineering, we need more medicine. In fact, we need more quantitative social sciences.
Okay, can you give me an example of how the impact of a patient's desires and needs affects how you develop a therapy or diagnostic?
Yeah, so there was actually over the past 18 months, we just went through this in a very interesting way, because we set out to we wanted to attempt to predict if a lung cancer patient would respond to a particular chemotherapy. And initially we thought this would have to be what we normally do with a blood test. Throughout our work with the medical oncology community, we realized that actually a first step would be to assess the performance status of the patient, because there's very solid data out there that says the better the patient does, the better the patient does. Sort of close to obvious, but how well a patient does prior to therapy is currently assessed qualitatively by the treating physician. Us being physicists, engineers, we said, interesting, maybe we can objectively measure that. So we came at it with a mindset of it's got to be one particular type of test, because that's the tools that I have. we realized through the work with those that have the need, those that have the actual problem setting, that in fact a totally different set of people we have to bring together. So we had a couple of engineers who rewired an Xbox to in fact watch a patient getting up from a chair. We had the people in quantitative self-assessment, for which we have a big center here, to help us build patient questionnaires. And we had people in our computer science department who think about face recognition, help us think through how do we assess a particular patient's performance status. And we put all of that together, because we are part of a big medical school as well, into a clinical trial right away to in fact test it out, whether that idea could actually be proven out. And so that's one of those examples where now you have a setup where we have an initial prototype approach of this health assessment that can go hand in hand with the disease assessment, and then we can follow patients through that course of treatment.
So you look at the status of the disease, obviously through the testing and results, but also measure performance. How are patients physically coping?
Correct, because again, obviously, you know, let's say a younger patient is different from an older patient. A more fit patient is different from a less fit patient, and so these kinds of differences at the what we call the phenotype level, we have to bring that to play if we really want to make a difference in the disease. And that means that we want to bring in these scientific principles to actually start supporting that decision making.
Okay. And what do the physicians say that you've consulted with? I mean, have they said that this could help them, or would it be just like a machine taking over for their own judgment?
So again, this is what then becomes special, the way we set this up as Convergent Science here, because we don't just consult with the physicians, but indeed the clinical team is part of the team. The oncologist is part of the science team. The engineers are part of the science team. In fact, the patients are part of the science team. So you have to build an environment, and that is what's so hard. You have to build an environment where every stakeholder is part of the team and has a seat at the table, and you work through this together, because only then can you get to a place where what you're building is indeed useful from every stakeholder's perspective. And that's
because you want them to be all in on the process from the beginning instead of being shown something.
Correct, and that's this difference of where we say we oftentimes there's a lot of talk about how science happens in silos, and in fact a lot of times that's actually important, because you have to be able to do basic science for the sake of knowledge generation, and eventually people can make use of that knowledge. But there's another way to think about it, and that is, can we take multiple silos and in fact convert them into pillars and build bridges across that? And this building bridges across that is what to us is Convergent Science, right? That is where we work across these pillars now. Everybody, a lot of these people who work within pillars, they are still these phenomenal, very deep thinking, spectacular scientists that we work with in individual disciplines. A lot of our mathematical modeling is in fact done here at the Viterbi School, the aerospace and mechanical engineering, right? So these are not people who traditionally would be part of cancer care development, but they are just the best people when it comes to mathematical model building.
How do you make sure everybody is speaking the same language?
Quick sidebar on same language, because it's an important piece, and this is where having moved to this country at the beginning of my graduate career, I had to appreciate fairly quickly that translation is very limited. Most of us who come here as foreigners, or when you come to a new country as a foreigner, eventually you try to crack a joke in that other language, and you realize that you just failed miserably, because it's not just translation. You have to be immersed. You have to be truly immersed. It's very hard. It's very, very hard. So you have to have a true purpose, because otherwise it's not worth it. If I'm just going for a trip, I can get away with translation. If I really want to make a difference, I have to immerse myself in a particular topic, and the topic has to be worth it. And this is to us where this definition of the wicked problem comes into play. Because any one of these wicked problems are worth it. And I have to have a very long-term commitment to that, because getting everybody to a place where we can speak to each other, with each other, actually with each other as opposed to each other, where we can speak with each other is really important, while still having an appreciation that within these pillars, there's so much more going on than what we bring to a particular solution.
Yeah, I would imagine that with the doctors, they try to talk with the engineers who are used to designing things like maybe wireless chips or modems or things like that. There needs to be some kind of education so they can understand the common issues and how each might be able to help the other.
And this is where the excitement comes into play. So when we first talked about how do we measure performance of a particular patient, Cyrus Shahabi, who is heading up one of our engineering departments here, when he realized that we had physicians and patients as part of the team, he's like, oh, wow, so what we built will actually be useful. That's awesome. Are they all going to be part of this as we go along? Because that's oftentimes when you really try to build something that's useful, but you're confined.
Yeah, and you don't have the feedback from those that you were supposed to be working for, and
Correct.
You have some distant population who you may never see.
Correct. And so this is why, and then again, this is this other piece where I think Los Angeles comes into play.
Yeah.
Because of the movie industry here, because of the creative industry, creativity is in its blood. So there's actually a beautiful complement between San Diego and Los Angeles, and that's why I'm a huge fan of Southern California, because San Diego has engineering in its blood, and Los Angeles really has creativity in its blood, while both are very technology heavy. So that's a beautiful play back and forth. And then if you consider that, LA County is 14 million people, San Diego is 4.5, 5, right?
Yeah.
So we are bigger than most countries in the world. In fact, we represent most of the world's ethnic diversity. We in fact represent a very large part of the socioeconomic spectrum as well. So I would argue there's almost no experiment that I cannot do in Los Angeles. And that there's no problem that I cannot understand in Southern California. And that is then what gets really exciting, and that is where we leverage the environment that we work within.
Okay. Do you want to talk some more about the liquid biopsy?
Yeah, favorite topic, of course.
Okay.
And again, it goes hand in hand with how we assess performance. So if we want to make a difference in cancer care, and that means we want to make a difference in cancer outcomes, we need two things. We need high-performance drugs, and we need to understand how we use them. And that second part, the understanding of how we use them, means we have to be able to assess the disease over and over and over. And a blood draw, that's the only size needle that you can stick into a patient over and over and over. So no matter how we solve the liquid biopsy challenge, we have to solve it. There's no choice. So we have taken this approach where we said, okay, one commonality amongst many of these big cancers, like prostate cancer, like breast cancer, is that they have individual cells traveling through the blood. And this is work that we've built on over the past 10 years. And it's actually quite fascinating because just this past June, work that we have done in the laboratory, very much where I always say, we duct tape things together. We are very, very solution oriented. We want to really solve a problem. What we explored, discovered, developed in the laboratory was then commercialized by a company, and the first product is now actually certified in California for the care of prostate cancer patients, which makes a very specific clinical, or supports a very specific clinical decision in terms of targeted therapy versus chemotherapy.